It's time for Disorganized Play! Season 5! That was very aggro. That was a little bit metal. Welcome back, everyone. Thank you, BSBK, DJ Regular, and all of our regulars, Modern Chow, Fakwa, and everyone who's here. I can't read that far away necessarily, so unless you want me to put my sunglasses on, which I will do for you. Welcome back. This is Disorganized Play. It's season, well, I don't know, season 5, whatever it is. It's season something. Yeah. It's well seasoned is what it is. We're back for the brand new arc that we just kicked off last week of When a Star Falls. So that's what we're going to be discussing today. We've got
Christian, thank you so much for subbing.
Thank you for subbing back up. I get the re-roll. Right? No, you're gonna give it to Amy. I know how you people are. Don't. That's fine. I get it. Oh, I didn't know there was a request for an Italian crooner. Next time. You know, it's the inaugural installment of the season, so we're all hustling behind the scenes.
Yeah.
I rolled up 5 minutes ago. Dom finished the graphic 7 minutes ago. This module was just printed literally in 1986.
Christian's giving it to Gaurav. It's not even in your show anymore.
Gaurav's not even in my show anymore. Oh, thanks, Christian. All right, I see how it is. Very good.
It's the mojo!
Luigi is not here today. He will be in the studio tomorrow night for the show, so you will just see this, literally this much of him tomorrow. So maybe we'll make Luigi Cam one of our chat unlockables.
Yeah.
So speaking of things that are on the, well, I don't know, this was a terrible transition. I wanted to get back to what our topics are for today, and we're going to talk about 3 things, sort of broadly, although they encompass both our session 0 and our session prep. We're going to talk about a dash of fate. We're going to talk about why a prequel, and we're going to talk about plot points. So we're going to do things a little bit differently this season. We're not going to do a recap show on Thursdays. It got to be too much.
Yeah.
It got to be too much for me, specifically of thinking about what we were going to talk about that day, like prepping some actual like salient topics to consider besides just Dom and I going, wow, what a terrible job Tom did. And then driving across town and getting here in the studio and doing the show and then getting back and so we're going to scale it back. We're going to kind of combine things into a Tuesday prep show with a little bit of recap. But I just don't want to spend our Tuesday shows talking about, wow, what a great job, what a great
Right.
I don't want to have a big recap show today. So we're going to kind of combine things, try and keep it focused on the prep, keep it focused on the issues. And as we go forward, if things come up like, oh, we really need to stop and examine this moment, we will do that. But we're not going to do a big, let's walk through every moment of last week's show. You can do that on your own on the VOD or on the YouTubes or wherever you see fit. So yes, I really did have a nice time off. Thank you, BSB Care. I enjoyed it. I'm also glad to be back and running this adventure. So let's dive in a little bit and kind of get to the meat of this is a DM advice show, is how I like to, that's how I advertise it, and that's how I like to, that's where I think it's most meaningful or most fruitful. And instead of necessarily just being a chat back show about what happened and what could happen, I really do like to, I want to try and keep to some DMing philosophy and practical application thereof. So let's dive in with our first topic, which is an aspect of fate. Is that what I called it?
You said a dash of fate.
A dash of fate. Very good, yeah. Oh, Thomas W. DeYoung, a reroll for me. Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Yes. Very good. Christian Linky, I'm happy to do 4 shows a day. Our Patreon has to at least quintuple, maybe times 10 on that one.
Yeah,
So,
I would love to have Tom on staff full time. But,
that would be fun and interesting.
but yeah, that's
Yes. So, a dash of fate. What do I mean by that? If I assume everybody watched last week, there's a couple things. There's a couple things to this, right? One thing that I think is a practical application let's get it out and let's get it going. Is when I mean a dash of fate, when I'm talking about Fate the game system. I don't know if you all are aware of Fate the game system, but I also do some social media for Evil Hat, so disclaimer up front for that. But one of the things that I really like about Fate is that it is irreversibly a character-driven game engine, right? Like there is no way you can get away from running that game without having some very specifically defined, literally what they call them, aspects of your character, right? And so for me, it was a little weird it was an interesting choice, let me put it that way, to set up Session 0 the way I did. Because previously, what Session 0 was for in this campaign was establishing a lot of relationships between the characters and giving them sort of this history that they could then kind of do a callback to and whatnot. And I thought that was very successful.
Yeah.
Now this past Session 0 was definitely almost like literally like you all meet in a tavern, right? Like if you didn't catch at the top of the show, like some people didn't, that you were in the hold of a ship, you'd be like, oh, they're sitting around gambling. They all meet in a tavern. Like it very much had that same structure to it. But for me, the purpose of this particular Session 0 wasn't so much to establish and reinforce different relationships between the characters, but instead to pick up much more, kind of discover who those characters were, right? And so that's, to me, how it ties into Fate. Like, what is the high concept, or at least a strong bit that each character is tied to? No, they may not necessarily be interrelated at this point, and you could argue, well, that's a little dangerous, but I feel like I can trust the players at the table to find ways to make their characters care about what each other is interested in, right? And I can lead them a little bit in that direction as well. But, so I don't need to lean as heavily on, oh, somebody's gonna go rogue and completely screw everybody else, and they're gonna say, I'm not interested in this adventure and I don't care, right? Like, I trust the players at my table on a metagame level to deal with that. So I wanted to find out, like, okay, we can get a backstory of these characters, but really, like, how are they going to play out at the table? So here's, let's bang through a few things that we learned about each of the characters, right? So Jorvin, or Badger as we always call him, I'm just going to write down some aspects of that character, or maybe what their high concept is, if I can pin it down, right? Yes, Fate is definitely fudge-ish, although I would argue that Fate is a more evolved version of Fudge, but I'm not well versed in all of the nitty-gritty details, and I haven't played Fudge, so. All right, so Jorvin, first of all, one thing that we discovered is that he's basically a pigpen character, right? So that's a bit that just became a thing. We didn't decide this ahead of time. It just evolved at the table. It's fun to play into. It definitely gives the other characters at the table, like, either something about him that they can embrace, or something about them that they can be repelled by. Like, oh, I'll give you this, but don't. Yeah. Okay. And the other thing about him is he's a blabbermouth.
Right.
Right? And I do appreciate the way that Kyle implements that, in terms of he does a thing that normally in DMing advice that you'd be like, oh, he's not doing good role playing. But he will say, my character talks for 20 minutes about all of the different varieties of mushrooms that he saw on the way to the ship. Now, technically, if you're a good, role player, then you would role play that little monologue, right? But guess what it does? It monopolizes the time at the table. It stalls everything out. People after 45 seconds go, I get it. And now you're just intruding on everybody else's ability to shine at the table. So you might you might sit back for a moment and go, oh, I really wish that he would role play this piece of it more. And I look back at it and I go, no, he's establishing his bit, he's playing his bit hard, and we all get it, and he just shorthanded what his character is about. Like, we just jumped ahead in the fiction, and we don't have to go back and do that, right? Like, he's saving everybody time at the table to play, and he's giving everybody else an opportunity to play while still maintaining the very, essential nature of his character. BSB Care says maybe he has insatiable curiosity. Maybe. That one's out. That one's kind of out to pasture a little bit, or not out to pasture. That's up for debate, I guess. That's still open for debate. Is he curious? He's definitely very social or uninhibited, right? I'm gonna make these different things. So he's social, uninhibited. I don't think I spelled it right. And unrefined. And then the last thing I'm going to put on here, because I think that pretty well sums it up. Never enough mushrooms. Actually, the last thing I'm going to put on here is brag about the badger.
Oh yeah, that's right.
Yeah, big deal. So if you want to throw up the mini table cam, we don't have our overhead cam, so that's kind of where he's at. There, that should be in pretty good. Yeah, curious maybe. We'll see if that plays out, right? I don't know that I can come up with one of these for every single character, but if we do Low Storm, right, that's Amy's character, I think, first of all, she is big on competition. It proves your worth, right? Like being tested, right? Any test is a test of worthiness. So now here's just a parenthetical note about creating aspects for Fate, right? Which is that the best aspects, in my experience, limited experience and interpretation, right? Like, I'm not gonna come on here and be like, oh, I know everything about Fate. I've played it years and years and years. None of that is true. But my advice on creating aspects for Fate, and this is where Fate is really open-ended, and I think people find it really challenging, right? They get kind of like glommed up, like, oh, I just put anything about my character?
Right.
Yes, put anything about your character, but put something that can be interpreted, that is both your character's strongest asset and their biggest weakness, right? Something that tells you, oh, okay, this character is a little bit obsessed with or can't avoid. This is the thing about your character that defines them but also gets them into trouble, right? And if I had one piece of advice for anyone who's creating a character, it's figure out how you can tell your DM how that character gets into trouble, because your character getting into trouble is what drives the drama. You may have a noble quest that you want to go someplace, but if you can't ever be swayed or tempted off of that quest, or there's not something about that quest that creates a conflict for you, then it's a very one-dimensional kind of campaign. And by extension, your character is a very one-dimensional kind of character, right? So to me, one of the things that's great about Amy's character is every test is a test of worthiness. Is that what we decided?
Yeah.
Any test? Every test.
Every test. Yeah, she definitely likes a challenge, but it's more than that. I feel it's definitely
it's a measure of character.
Yeah.
How about if we put it that way?
Mm-hmm.
Every test is a measure of character.
Mm-hmm.
So BSB Care says, like he is on a noble quest, but he's also clumsy. Really, what it is if you can come up with a single aspect that's more double-edged, right? Like, to me, that's two different aspects of the characters. He's on a noble quest, but he's also clumsy, right? A really good aspect is one succinct thing, okay? So let me give you a good example of this, because this is where fate gets really weird, right? Or can get easily misinterpreted. Somebody brought up on Twitter the other day, you know, I don't like fate because you can create your character and just say they're the world's greatest swordsman, and then that's the way it is in the fiction. And they, you know, maybe the DM says, oh well, you just have a +2 bonus, or maybe the DM says, oh well, you're going to invoke that aspect of being a sword fighter, of world's greatest swordsman all the time. Mm-hmm. I guess you win all the sword fights. And I would argue, yes, but I'd also argue that's a bad high concept, right? That's a bad aspect, because world's greatest swordsman is really just more of a fact than a character attribute.
It's not, yeah.
You know, it doesn't. It's not. There's no room for interpretation, right? There's an easy tweak that you can put on that aspect, and all of a sudden it opens up a whole world of possibility. I would change that aspect to thinks he's the world's greatest swordsman. Okay? Now all of a sudden, you can say, all right, well, that's not 100% true all of the time, right? Yeah. But also I can see how I get that character into trouble. Oh, he thinks he's the world's greatest swordsman. Somebody comes along and is like, what makes you such a big deal? Well, as a matter of fact, I'm the world's greatest, you know. Now it doesn't change anything from the character's perspective. I'm the world's greatest swordsman. But it changes it tremendously in a game perspective, right? So I just want you to think about, when you're creating your characters, even in your D&D games, of creating another name for it is just a hook, right? I think a hook is a little bit a little specific of like, oh well, he, you know, once that's fulfilled, that thing is over with. It's almost like a kind of a quest thing, like, what's the hook? Oh, okay. But a really solid character aspect is a hook that you can play both sides on. You can use it to your advantage. You can use to your disadvantage. Right. You know, as Christian Linky points out, like fate is an amber. You can't, if you claim greatest swordsman as an aspect, it's not absolute. Also, I just think I as a fate GM would go, that's not a good aspect. Like, it doesn't necessarily work. And I would also argue on another level, if you're going to allow world's greatest swordsman as an aspect, then the game that you're running probably isn't about sword fighting. Like it must be about something else. It might be about honor. It might be about something totally, but it's not a fighting game. Because as the GM, why would you allow like that as an absolute thing, right? Unless it's going to be a story of a fall from grace, and eventually that the character evolves where that's not true. We're getting pretty far afield. I don't want to make this a whole huge explication of fate. What I do want to do is show how ideas from fate can work their way into your D&D game. So every test is a measure of your... Do you want to use worth or character? Do you have a feeling? I feel like she takes it personally.
It's worth.
Measure of your worth. Mm-hmm. And I think the other thing about Low Storm is pride in her accomplishments. I think those are two pretty solid things that we can put in the hopper here for Lowstorm. Mm-hmm. Now, Alton
Newbury.
Alton Newbury. I do feel like we have such strong characters over here that I think Eric is kind of like slow playing his hand a little bit. So we don't have a ton of stuff to put on the table here, right? He is kind of a quiet character so far.
Yeah.
Which is fine.
I mean, yeah, he's definitely, he has described himself, although not at the table, but in chats, he has described himself essentially as Errol Flynn. So he's a bit of a gambler, a bit of a show-off, maybe.
Yeah.
And maybe he is the world's greatest swordsman.
Right.
But yeah, and a bit of a flirt, I think.
I think the big thing for him is he's out to prove himself via duels, right?
Yeah.
Like that matters to him a lot.
Yeah.
Is
at the edge of the table there? We can move the camera over a little bit.
No, it's fine.
Okay. But yeah, he I think he's definitely going to be coming out. Errol Flynn, a little bit of both. A little bit of Robin Hood, a little bit of Captain Blood. Basically take almost every Errol Flynn role, and that's kind of what he's going for.
So, yeah. I think that's what we've learned about him so far, is that he's out to prove himself via duels. I'm creating aspects for Strumthrum now.
Cheese Boto, thank you for the sub.
Oh, thanks for the sub.
Let us know who you want us to reroll to in any of our games.
Anyone. You could give another one to Garav if you wanted to.
Yeah.
Or. So let's talk a little bit about Havana's character, Strumthrum. So she loves shiny objects, right? Mm-hmm. That's definitely something that's established. Can't stay away from shiny objects.
I think the thing that she established was a bit of OCD, because she didn't want to give anyone her stuff, because, especially Badger, because he got it dirty immediately. And so she was very protective of handing anything over to him, or him touching it in any way. Yeah.
I'm just going to put, I put down shiny and also keep it shiny.
Yeah. She is very much a raven, although she's not. She's a grosbeak.
Red-breasted grosbeak. Yes. I think that her character also. She said at one point, like, "Well, I'm not like the brash socialite. I'm an observer.
Right.
Right. Yeah. I'm a note taker. So I'm gonna put that down. I think she maybe finds herself an outsider, right?
Yeah, I think a little bit. It seemed she was sort of wide-eyed in the world, and just sort of following people around and seeing how they were doing it, because she was doing a little bit of the Kenku kind of learning about people, somewhat of a mimicry kind of thing, but not really activating the mimicry, but just like going, okay, that's how people talk. Got it.
All right. I think those things are...
And note-taking, yeah.
Those are... that works. That works. You all can read that. You got it. So that's sort of where we're at. So those are things that to me are central to these characters that came out of our session 0, right? We learned a lot about who they are, kind of how they're going to what aspects of the characters we can play off of, and what we can use as hooks to kick them further into the adventure, right? Because at this point, the hooks into the adventure are very strong for Lostrom and Jorvin, and not necessarily as strong for Strumthrum and Alton, right? Lostrom and Jorvin have a quest to go find out what happened to the druid in the Ironwood Forest. These guys don't necessarily have that same drive. But, all right, so in terms of a dash of fate, like this is a way to take the character-driven principles of fate and kind of extract them and see how they might fit into our D&D game, how we can apply them to our prep and analysis of our D&D game. The other dash of fate that you saw a little bit of, and that I think we're going to continue to explore throughout this particular arc, was the moment of heroism, right? The hero's favor, or whatever we ended up calling it. I've had like 3 different names for it in my head, so I don't ever remember which one I decided on.
I thought it was hero's favor.
Hero's favor, right? So for those of you who are curious, basically the way that works is it is a token, sort of like inspiration, that they can spend to essentially create a moment that exists outside of the rules, right? And I don't know which I should explain first, like what its purpose is or how it works.
I think purpose.
Okay. Yeah. It would, BSB Care makes a good point. That would be interesting to kind of track each of these characters with these aspects and then kind of see like which ones came to the forward and which ones receded. So the purpose of it is, so many times when I'm sitting here in the DM seat, I will get into the middle of a situation and somebody at the table will say, I want to shoot the amulet out of his hand. I want to, cut the rope on the boom of the sail and swing across on the boom and knock the ogre into the water. I mean, that's almost literally the example that we saw last session, is I want to pin the sea hag to the deck by cutting the sail, right? Right. And those are situations that I find really interesting. I think they're great moments of imagination on the character's part. So for me, as someone who's trying to elicit and heighten the drama of any given situation, for me, my job as a DM, your job as a DM, I hope, is to find that memorable moment in every session, right? To find that cool thing that everybody's going to be talking about at the end of the game, right? And when those things come along, I'm looking for opportunities for stuff like that, but I find those opportunities to be, when I put on my DM's hat, I find them really difficult to adjudicate in the D20 rule system.
Right.
Because you end up kind of bumping up against one of two things. Either you bump up against the action economy. Well, technically, cutting the rope is an action. I'll call it interact with an object, so you get to do one of those, but then you're going to use your move action to get on top of the boom, and that means that when you get to the other side, you don't have enough movement left to get it, you start kind of like piecing through the rules piece of it. Now, you can just throw that away if you want. Go, oh, that sounds like a cool idea, just roll a d20. So you bump up against the action economy, or you end up bumping up sort of against like their skill ability, and you go, oh, well, why don't you give me a dexterity check? And then they fail it, and you go, well, it doesn't happen. And everybody goes, oh, that's too bad, because I wanted something cool to happen. Are we getting rated right now?
Yeah, hey, Blinken, thank you very much.
Blinken, thank you so much. Thanks to everyone for welcome to our DM prep show. We're talking about our D&D campaign that we run every Wednesday night at 8 p.m. Pacific. Session 1 is tomorrow, so if you want to join us, jump on in. So for me, as someone trying to adjudicate Dungeons & Dragons rules, that's what my DM rules brain, like, how do I keep this fair, right? Like that whole idea of, okay, well, if you don't want to fit it into the action economy of a bonus action, a reaction, your movement, and your action, if you want to ignore that and go, well, just give me a d20 roll, well, then how do you keep that fair for everybody? Because then you kind of run into the situation where they go, well, wait a minute, how come for me it was? Well, and I don't want to have to keep all of that stuff in my head, right? That's not my thing. So I sort of blended kind of two things together from different game systems, right? One was create an advantage, overcome, like basically sort of like, really a big thing was create an advantage from fate, right? Or create an aspect. So to me, everything is like, I want to do something that creates an advantage for me. I want to do something that's like cool and heroic. So I want to smash the leg of the shelf and cause all of the chemicals to come crashing down on the ground, and I'm going to flick my torch into it and start a big fire between me and the rest of the orcs who are trying to pile their way into the room. I could come up with... Here's the problem of fitting that within the D&D action economy, is you go, hey, that sounds great, Dom, roll. And Dom does it, and then Dom goes, okay, can I shoot my bow at those guys or whatever? Like, you generally do that to set yourself up to do something, right? And I go, no, you've used all of your actions to create this cool circumstance, and you can do that next round.
Yeah.
I'm gonna grab these three things and make this acid and throw it at them. Well, you used all your actions to make the acid. Next round you can throw it at them, and they go, oh, it just sucks the wind out of the pace and the momentum and the excitement that the player has for their idea. So I said, let's create this thing that exists outside of the action economy. Like, to be clear, on a mechanics-wise, the way this thing works is it's free. You're spending your token to do this thing. You basically get a free, however much crap the DM says you can do to pull this thing off. So I took, create an aspect, create an advantage from fate. That doesn't really have a lot of bounds to it. I did give the players some examples of like, you can do this, but like I said to Amy, you can't just play the card and solve the mystery. You can't play you can't make the roll and then kill the boss monster under most circumstances, right? Like, I reserve that right to put some bounds around it, but you can use it to essentially break the game in a one-shot, kind of like meaningful, hopefully heroic way. Now, the second piece of it that I took was I stole from Powered by the Apocalypse games, and I made this a mixed result that, depending upon what you roll, you either succeed. There's an okay chance that you'll succeed. You might succeed with style, which is a fate thing, right? If you roll your 2d, instead of rolling 2d6, you roll 2d10, right? So if you roll a 20 or above, you succeed with style, and whatever you wanted to happen, even better than you thought, right? If you get a 16 to 19, then you get what you wanted. If you get an 11 to 15, it's a mixed result. Something good happens, but something bad is also, there's some sort of trade-off. And then 10 or below, it's not a Donald Duck plush.
I wasn't going to interrupt you, Tom, but that's Uncle Scrooge. He's just holding a picture.
That's Uncle Scrooge.
Uncle Scrooge.
And if you get a 10 or below, it goes horribly wrong for you and might affect somebody else at the table, or create a bad circumstance for the party or whatever, but you get to keep your hero's favor, right? You don't lose it. So those were two different sort of system mechanics that are both very narratively interesting, right? They have interesting results no matter what happens. Even if you fail your hero's favor moment, something weird's gonna happen, and you provided the inspiration for it, and you rolled badly, so you don't necessarily feel like the DM screwed you, right? So that's sort of like the Frankenstein child of these two game systems that, both of which I love. that I wanted to introduce to my D&D game so that it doesn't break the game in terms of they're continually trying this thing.
Right.
But it does give them the opportunity, like we saw last night or last week. Was it with, did I use it with Havana? Or I said, like, this sounds like it got, whenever the game is getting so complicated that you're starting to do sort of this negotiation back and forth with the player, like, well, how would that work? And now, wait a minute, you want to do what else? Like, the great thing about this mechanic is I can go, hey, it sounds to me like you're trying to use your hero's favor. Why don't we, like, it was that illusion that she cast, right? She was like, I want to do this illusion that does this thing, and then I'm going to observe these people, and blah, 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 and it was like, it was such a convoluted set of things, which was completely legitimate and very interesting, but didn't fit within her class abilities,
right.
Didn't really fit within, like, how many different things were going on at that time, but certainly, like, her casting that illusion didn't make sense from a level 0 character where we were at what she should be able to do. But then we turned it into her moment of hero's favor, and it worked great. It was, and not only that, but she was like, not only was it a moment for her to go, oh wow, I had this really cool thing happen, but it was also a moment for me to expand upon what she had defined and have her succeed in a way like better than she expected, but also worse than she expected, right? Like, she cast that spell so well that I go, you're actually sucked into like how great this looks, and you can't get a look at what everybody else is doing. But if these guys want to make a roll, they can. To me, that was a terrific trade-off.
Yeah.
You know? So I was really happy with the mechanic, and I think you're going to, I mean, I want to incorporate it into this session, but hopefully that gives you an idea of what my thinking is behind it, what the purpose is of it. I think we're going to have to see, you know, the players kind of get used to, like, what are the boundaries around this thing? But it's very flexible, it's very fungible, and it expands the game in a way that's not going to break it, but definitely gives them opportunities to be the heroes that they want to be, so that when they have a moment of inspiration, you can go, yes, let's do it like this. Yeah, well, I could have had Alton swing into the water instead of knocking the hag into the water. But I liked the fact. Honestly, I'm watching the clock and I'm going, let's get out of this encounter. I had planned much more to happen, but I was like, we don't need to have much more than that happen. Let's end this encounter and bring everything to a close and kind of put our little bow on the session and move on to next week. And him failing or having a mixed success on that roll was perfect for that. So. Yeah, it really worked out well. And I was able to give him a mixed success reward where, like, there's this amulet now on the desk. What's this? God, it creates a great hook for further down the road. All right, next up, we're going to talk about, you can make this go away for now. That's fine if you want to make that.
Either way, I don't care.
Either way, it'll come back in a minute. Not in a minute, but it'll come back after we talk about this. So why a prequel? So this is our first, chat back session or prep session or whatever you want to call it. And so we did not have a chance to talk about what's going on in terms of this adventure and how it fits into the rest of the Ironkeep Chronicles campaign, right? Because obviously we've played for, a year or whatever? Like, how long have we been playing? We started in October of last year, is that right?
With Ironkeep?
No,
I feel like it was earlier than that.
I feel like it was earlier than that too. I have to go back and look at when was our first session.
Yeah.
Anyway, so we've been playing Ironkeep Chronicles for a while.
It's definitely way before,
Yeah,
way before.
but this is a whole new arc.
April or May.
Okay.
Yeah, April
so
or May.
we're at about a year now, right?
Yeah.
I'll have to look at page 42 of the D&D 4E Dungeon Master's Guide. Where is it? Where's your 4th edition Dungeon Master's Guide? Look at that.
Yeah.
Yeah, there it is. Modern Chow says, I could see players say that they were able to accomplish a feat with the hero's favor in a past session and say that they should be allowed to do it again. Yeah, well, you know, they still have to make that roll, right? So I think, you know, sure, you're going to have some DM negotiation, like why could I do it this way this time and not, you know, you can't automatically, hero's favor is something that is clearly demarcated as being outside the bounds of the normal rules of the game. So I wouldn't expect a player to say like, oh, well, I jumped in the air and grabbed a hold of that chicken's legs and flew across the street and landed on the, you know, laundry line and then tiptoed my way across up into the window, you know, the balcony before.
Mm-hmm.
Why don't I, you know, why can't I just do that now? You can try, but make the roll to do it, right?
Yeah.
The other thing that's important about Hero's Favor is that it is not tied to a skill roll. It's 2d10 plus your proficiency modifier, right? So it's the same for all the characters at the table, assuming they're all the same level, right? And it gradually gets better as you get higher level. You become more heroic. For them, it was +1. Now it's going to be +2. So. All right, I do want to talk a little bit about why what's going on in terms of the why this module, what's going on with this thing, right? Why this module? The short answer is I've run it before, so I'm familiar with the events and kind of how they play out and what happens, right? So that was a big thing for me. I also like the idea that it kind of has this sort of theme of prophecy and destiny, and it was an outdoor adventure. I wanted to not do a dungeon crawl because we've done that. I wanted to not do an urban adventure or mystery adventure because we had done that. I really wanted to do something that was a little bit more kind of, this is not particularly sandboxy, but that was a little bit more kind of like, let's get out into the great white whatever. So the woodlands here, it's very much an overland trek, right? Yeah, you know, the Hero's Favor may kind of tilt the odds once you get to +3, but it's still a work in progress in terms of the rule, and I don't think we're gonna get that far with these guys.
Well, they're already 3rd level.
We'll see. Yeah, they are 3rd level. So maybe when they, you know, maybe when they hit 4th or whatever, it will flip over. Mm-hmm. And we'll just kind of keep an eye on it. You know, the thing is, like, the majority of the outcomes becoming mixed successes is fine with me.
Mixed successes are great.
Yeah,
because everyone gets something they want.
Yeah, exactly. So I was thinking last week at the end of the session, I was thinking, oh wow, it's tough to roll a 16, and I'm like, that's fine. I don't have a problem with that, actually. Mm-hmm. It's going to get easier to get to 16, and yeah, I don't feel bad about but the majority getting mixed successes. So I like the module. I'm familiar with it. I think it's a classic. I like the themes that are involved. I like the way that it's set, and that's why I picked When a Star Falls. I know it's
the UK modules. I think Graham Morris wrote all of them,
maybe
or at least 2 of them. But the UK modules are considered some of the best original AD&D modules. So yeah, and this is the first one, I believe, or is this UK 2? UK 4.
UK 4.
Well,
there's also the Gauntlet and the Sentinel, which is a pair of modules which I have not run, but I own. So the other thing that about this is I went into this arc of Ironkeep Chronicles very deliberately, or putting a considerable amount of thought into, we're going to try to stick to 8 sessions, right? Obviously, I'm notorious for not being able to do that, but
you have
we knew this up front, and I didn't really know that up front when I started the last arc. It was kind of like, well, I think why don't we go with like 10 and then take a break? And I was like, oh, okay, well, let's find a way to make that happen.
Yeah.
And it didn't necessarily gel at the end there. I feel like we probably could have benefited from 1 session more, but I always feel that way. But, so going into this particular arc, I was like, what can I do that I can try to keep self-contained to 8 sessions, including a session 0, right? So really 7 sessions. And I feel like we can do that with this. Just being one adventure, not being a dungeon crawl, makes that feel feasible. So that's kind of some of my thinking into what I went into, like, picking this. I like to do classic AD&D modules just because it also kind of tugs on the heartstrings of nostalgia. That's that. So there we go. Now, why a prequel? For those of you who are paying attention, I basically set this 1400 years before the events of the previous campaign, right? Or the previous arc of the campaign. The previous arc of the campaign was really one kind of contiguous adventure over the course of, I would say, a couple months of the characters' lives, right? And it was set in the modern D&D 5 timeline. So what's going on there is largely what's going on in Modern Chow. Thank you so much for the bits.
And thank you, Nullzone, for subbing on in.
Yes, Bex, thanks for being here.
Let us know about your reroll.
Aha, yes. So...
Yes, Tom can get rerolls.
Yes, I can.
If you want to be that person.
So that was all one event. Now, it started with their adventures into... We really started with Tales of the Yawning Portal, and so we did the Sunless Citadel, and we did White Plume Mountain, and then we went into this adventure in Waterdeep, and then we went into Expedition to the Barrier Peaks, right? And Expedition to the Barrier Peaks ended in a kind of like an interesting kind of weird place in that they were in this planar nexus that was in a different time, out of sync with the rest of... Thank you, Bex, appreciate it. That was in a different sync with the time zone of what was going on in the prime material, right? I think we have some opportunities to play with the timeline because of what was going on in Expedition to the Barrier Peaks. There was so much that was packed in there that I think fundamentally changes what's going on in my version of the Forgotten Realms, with the crew members of Expedition to the Barrier Peaks end up turning into the gods in the Forgotten Realms because they're charged with all this divine energy and whatnot. I think that gives us a great opportunity to, like, well, let's play around with the timeline of the Forgotten Realms. If we're going to make this my Forgotten Realms, let's really kind of put a stamp on it. Rather than pick up where we left off and go, oh, well, do these characters know these characters, and how does it what, and would you want your character to interact with your new character, and what would they really do? And, you know, I would feel weird about kind of like commandeering Gaurav's character and saying, well, now he's doing this, and you know, that whole thing where you run into their characters and whatnot. I don't think that just didn't seem interesting. It creates more problems than it creates interesting answers for me, right? Now, if we go back 1,400 years and start to wipe out all of what I would consider the shiny objects of the Forgotten Realms. Waterdeep is not a city. There's not 80 wizards riding around on dragons in Waterdeep is a major stronghold. Like, that's it, right? And Neverwinter is not a city. It's a castle that has a bunch of farmers and fishermen around it, right? Well, what this does is it allows us to take the things that we know and sort of like almost do like a quantum leap style thing with the campaign where we jump back in time and we go, oh, I can see the roots of how Oakhurst got founded, or I can see what was going on that created such a goblin infestation in the Neverwinter woods or whatever. Or I can see events of like the elves losing their dominance and their control over major parts of the world and whatnot. So I can introduce new concepts, new things into the campaign that I want to introduce very easily, but I can also do, essentially, it's not really like a call back, it's more like a call forward to how things are going to be, right? And so to me, it's a way of reinterpreting a bunch of material that's been established in a way that's fresh and interesting, and also gives a different feel to the campaign without completely wiping out the campaign, right? So this can be much more of, I don't want to use like Wild West, like it's going to be a gunslinger type of thing, but I do mean Wild West in terms of gritty frontier, life is hard, resources are scarce, scratching your way, out of the dirt of the earth to get what you want kind of feel for the campaign, and still say it's set in the Forgotten Realms, the things that are familiar, there's still magic missile, you're not going to be able to buy a belt of flying wherever you want, whenever you want, but that's the things that about D&D are still true, and the things that you may have heard of, you might still interact with, right? It also enables me to, I can make the campaign my own, but I can also do callbacks to things that you viewers who have been paying attention to the show know about, that you can see connections between in the campaign that you wouldn't necessarily, wouldn't be meaningful if you weren't a viewer of the show, right? And yet, if you're not a regular viewer of the show, it's not like you missed out on a lot, right? This guy seems interesting. Oh yeah, that's Gingy the Poisoner. What? Oh yeah, like 1400 years ago, he turns into this totally like evil kind of like weird, poisoner dude. But now he's this adventuring druid or whatever he is, right? Mm-hmm. So I wanted to create a way for our longtime viewers and regulars to see that there's a coherent world that's being drawn and that their knowledge and enjoyment of the show is rewarded, while still creating a new sort of singular experience for anyone who hasn't watched the show and been a long time viewer, and not having to worry about, what's what are the characters from the last arc? What are they up to, and what are their effects, and da 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 da. So that's my reasoning behind the prequel. I think I think it's going to pay off. So I think that's worthwhile. Now, yeah, and I mean the great thing about setting it in the early years is also there's not that much material about the deep history. Like there's not that many details, right? Oh, I think one of the...
Hey, Mr. Troy D, thank you very much. How you doing,
Awesome.
Troy?
Thanks for subbing up for third month now.
Good to see you.
I think one of the other things that's difficult for me in terms of Forgotten Realms lore is I'm not very good at keeping track at a lot of it. And the closer that you get to the current timeline, the more material there is about it. Oh, what about the Time of Troubles? And the Forgotten Realms has been rebooted. Like the last 30 to 50 years of it has been rebooted really heavily, and there's a lot of like, there's the novels and the fiction and or whatever. I don't want to keep track of that, and I don't want people. I don't think people are going to pinch me on it, but I don't want to put myself in the position where I go down the analysis paralysis hole of like, oh, what's the name of the bar on that street on that corner?
Yeah.
Is Calvin Blackstaff in control? No, I can just wholesale make up a bunch of people and not worry about it, and yet still feel like it's canonical. Nobody remembers those people. Good. Who cares? So that's that. So the last thing I want to do today, and we're running a little bit long, but I think we'll be okay. As Dr. Faust Painting Clinic points out, there's the sundering and the unsundering and the resundering and the and I don't mean to like cast aspersions on that. Like I get why Wizards has to reboot their timeline and make adjustments between editions and between what new people come in to introduce story bits and whatnot, and that all of that is fine. Mm-hmm. Like and if you can keep up with that, good for you. Like God bless. I'm glad you can. I don't have the time or inclination to do that, so I decided to set this as a prequel, and I'm excited about it. That's what I have to say about that. So then the last thing that I want to do today, and we'll go back to our little our on the table kind of camera here. But so one of our goals is to try and keep this to 8 sessions, right? That's a stated objective. Did you find the advice?
I did. Yes.
Yes, we found it. All right.
Yes. Yeah.
You want to tell everyone what the advice is?
Oh.
You want to tell me what the advice is? Because I was busy blabbing.
The advice is to just make something. If someone wants to do something that is in combat but is not a combat role necessarily, you can make it a check. Basically, you can do a skill check of some nature, which we have used in the past. We had a whole chase full of skill checks and stuff like that. So there are. It's basically some alternative ways to use the rules to adjudicate things. So yeah, it's good. It's good advice.
And I think that's it is good advice, and that's solid. And it does, if you make it a skill check that maybe plays into one of the player's key abilities, then it gives them a good chance of success. As always, my big beef with the D20 system is nothing interesting happens if they fail that check. And that, to me, is the super bummer about that particular rule, is the binary result means that their enthusiasm for the cool idea that they came up with just gets undercut because the dice were crappy to them.
Yeah.
So that's why I implemented this. The other thing too is, if that's the case, like if you use that on a regular basis, then I think if I was the players, then I might be inclined to like just keep pitching like ridiculous crap to see how often I can invoke my dexterity check. Can I just make a dexterity check?
Right.
Rather than there's no controls over how often.
Using the rule of cool.
Yeah, a little bit, right? I mean, there's a temptation there for it.
Yeah. All right. The other part of advice in there is that the DM's best friend is basically it's doing a rule of cool type thing. If someone suggests something, you're like, "That's really cool. Make your standard roll, but I give you +2 to it."
Yeah.
Or you're like, they say something, you're like, "That's great, but it's going to be really hard to do. Here's a -2."
All right, I'll give you inspiration, right? There are certainly ways within the game system to deal with this, but to me, what I like about Hero's Favor is that it creates the opportunity, a limited opportunity for the players to break the game and potentially invent pieces of fiction, right? I think you could say, one of the examples that I gave to the players was, imagine that you're all of a sudden you're down at the docks, you're doing the smuggling operation, and 2 guards show up. And I said, you could use your Hero's Favor to say, oh, it turns out one of the guards knows me. Rather than this instantly turning into a combat situation, oh, it turns out one of the guards knows me. Now, they're just completely creating that fiction right there on the spot that, oh, we have this pre-existing relationship, they know me for some reason or whatever. It's not something that the DM has planned or suggested. It's something that players fabricating out of whole cloth. And I, as the DM, can go, all right, roll. Let's see what happens. Oh, yes, he knows you. He also knows the thief over there because he's had him in the brig 7 times. Now we get into, or whatever the result may be. But the point being is, I think the players can use it to help fabricate details about the environment or the circumstance and feel like they have free reign to do so without turning it into, well, we just make everything up? That seems like we're the DM. Traditional D&D players get a little like, verklempt about that. They really don't. They really chafe against taking over the role of the DM or taking DM powers like into their own hands, even briefly. I think. An adventure style deck. BSBK, I'm not sure what you're referring to.
I think, are you talking about the action deck that we have for Savage Worlds? Basically, there's cards in Savage Worlds that you can get that allow you to do something really cool. Like, oh, you make the the bad guy monologue for a turn, so he doesn't, have an action, or you get to.
Oh, okay.
All the townspeople can come in and support you, so you get, 3 people per person or something to fight with you or something like that. So things that will change the game, like that, which is cool.
Yeah, the thing is, like, I don't want it to be like, I love decks like that, right? But I don't want to use it in this situation, because what I don't want is, I don't want players fishing for cards. I don't want them to learn the deck and then go, I'm hoping that I get, you know.
The way that it's done, at least for wild cards, is that it's only once chat unlocks it can they do a draw from that deck.
Mm-hmm.
But I think City of Mist, which is a Powered by Apocalypse game, does very much a similar thing as Heroes Favor, and allows you to basically, there's a change the game, and then there's give it all you got, which is basically just essentially changing the game, but for an ultimate move. So there's lots of tools, but it's hard in D&D to have the whole thing run like that, because the rest of the rules with D&D just don't
They're very
allow
granular.
that.
I like the suggestion that Wraith42 made that use alternative stats for particular skills. So if your fighter wants to make an intimidate check, they can use strength instead of using charisma and things like that.
Sure,
like in given circumstances.
Yeah, that's cool.
I love that idea. One other thing before we take on our final topic is, I was just parenthetically very happy with. They didn't turn out very well on stream, but I was very happy using these Pathfinder. I don't remember which adventure path their face cards they're from, but I used these face cards, and it really helped me as a GM. Like, I put little stickies on them and renamed them. Let's get a little shine. I sleeved them. Why did you sleeve them, huh? Yeah. Anyway, the point being that I used those, and I was very. Let's see, how's that? Is that better? No, not really better. Anyway, whatever. You get the idea. They were a great prop. Not just a prop, they were a great tool for me, and also for the players. It really gave them an idea of, like, oh, they're there, that's who's talking. I really was able to get into character. Having that many different NPCs is a big challenge, and keeping them all straight in your head, but being able to point, like, oh, Dolston shows up, blah, blah, blah. Like, yes. That was a big plus. So I really recommend it if you're going to do an NPC-heavy session like that. I've had them around forever. I don't often use them, but I was like, that paid off huge time for me. Okay, so the last thing I want to do today is, I went through the adventure. Our goal is to keep the adventure to 7 sessions. So I went through and I just made a list of everything that must happen, right? So this is obviously super spoiler heavy in terms of events of the adventure, but that's fine. So I'm just gonna write these on individual note cards and start throwing them down. So, things that must happen. There is for those of you who are not familiar, I'm not going to go into a lot of detail on what each of these encounters are, but you can buy the PDF from us. I don't know if you have the link in chat or not. Doesn't matter. I'm not going to deeply explain what each particular thing is, but so the inciting incident in When a Star Falls is the memory web. They encounter a monster that basically shares the memories of these monks with them, right? Different things that. So I'm just going to give, I'm going to just quick bullet point out on individual cards things that events that occur within the course of the plot of the adventure, and also some other things that I have planned. It's not going to be a huge spoiler, I think, for some of this stuff. I want you to know where I'm coming from, what elements I need to put together in order to make this all kind of happen. So unlike previous adventures where I sort of freelanced my way through it and eventually we got to the end, I'm really trying to keep track of these are the plot elements that we need to make sure get addressed, and there might be other frippery around the edges of it, right? So that needs to happen. They need to
while you're writing that, Time Kaiser asked, how do we come up with things that chat is able to do to the table? And it takes a lot of planning. Basically, it depends on the game, it depends on how we're playing it, and it depends on where we're going with it. But a lot of times what we try to do is have story tiers, things that will affect or branch the story in certain ways, and it either helps characters grow or it helps the story expand to different ways. So those are the goals that we tend to aim for when we come up with story rewards. But things like the carrier penguins or the toasts and wild cards or whatever, those are just fun ways for you guys, because we don't see chat when we're sitting here. Tom and I do right now, we have it up, but during a normal game, the table is not looking at chat, so there's no way for us to directly interact with you guys. So the only way to pass messages to us are through carrier penguins or toasts or things like that have them. So that's where those came from. And in terms of your World of Warcraft question, yes, D&D is great for a World of Warcraft RPG. In fact, D&D 4E is purposefully built to be like World of Warcraft.
World of Warcraft, yeah.
So 5e is great. 5e is awesome and fantastic. And if you're playing with new RPG players who want to get involved in D&D, I do recommend 5e. However, if people have experience with it and like the granular aspects of a MMORPG, 4e is built for that. It's built with the tiered structure of skills and things like that, and it's built. Combat is very much run like it is on an MMO. So take a look at 4E. Thanks, BSB Care. Yeah, I've been talking about the evolution of rewards and goals and tiers since we started the channel back in 20...
I was just thinking about that on the way over here.
13. Yeah.
Really? Has it been that long?
Well, we're actually coming up on the 5th anniversary of when we started the channel, but not when we started streaming to the channel.
Yeah,
so
streaming was different.
We started the channel in 2013, but we didn't start streaming until December of 2014. And then Ironkeep didn't start until March, like a week after...
You mean Barkies?
Barkies, yeah. Barkies didn't start until about a week after Critical Role started, I think. But we had the Stormblossom Chronicles, which came before Barkies and everything. So we did that first, and then that's kind of how we got our setup planned out. And then we did Barkies Brigade right after that.
All right. So so this is a very skeletal version of what needs to happen, right? There's some other things I'm going to add on here, but let's take a look at, and that's the best way to organize these. So
yeah, 4th anniversary of streaming. Yep.
Actually, so this is the way this works.
And thanks for being with us, all of you, everyone. People who were here from the very beginning, like BSB Care, and people who are just joining us, like Time Geyser and everyone.
What I was going to say is I was thinking on the way over here, like, how many different places we have moved from, how the channel has grown, and how our capabilities have changed so much even in the past few months. Like, I don't have to wear a mic around my neck, all that stuff.
Yeah, we've made some progress.
Yeah, it's amazing stuff. So the very basic, these are the things that absolutely must happen in the course of the adventure. There are some other optional things that we're going to talk about. but these are the very basic things that need to happen, right? They have an encounter with the memory web. They absorb the memories of these monks that have been dispatched by Shelfrey, who is the head sage of the Tower of Heavens, right? That gives them the impetus to then go try to retrieve the star that's fallen. That's what they're trying to do, right? And it turns out that the star is embedded with this group of Darrow, and you know they have to go kind of fight their way in, fight their way out. Now, one of my goals is to have a lot less fight anything, and a lot more role-playing opportunities. So keep that in mind. Like those are areas where I'm looking to streamline. Once they get to the star, they go back to the tower, having fulfilled the monk's mission, and try to turn it back over to the High Sage. But when they get to the tower, they find out that the Sage is essentially besieged in the tower, and there's a pretender to the throne who's in the process of trying to essentially sort of smoke out the Sage. Once they overthrow the pretender, then the Sage is like, wow, thanks for this, I appreciate this. Can you now take this to these Sverfneblin weirdos who live off in the mountains, and if you trade this for them, then they will give you a new set of the Books of Prophecy, right? So essentially the Sage is like, this event was the last thing that was foretold in these Books of Prophecy. Smoke out the Sage. And the Books of Prophecy say that if we get this star, we'll get access to a new set of the Books of Prophecy, right? So that's sort of the whole, that's the whole arc of the adventure, and those are four fundamental things that I think without those things, the plot itself doesn't really, it sort of falls apart, right? Mm-hmm. That's the fundamental skeleton of the plot. Now, some side things can happen. I don't want to get too deep into this, but there is the potential for a druid encounter that sort of fits in here. Yeah. The druid, you know, they encounter the druid tells them, oh, it fell in this place, go to that valley and you may be able to locate it. And then there's also, I don't really know how to describe this. There's a weird sort of random encounter with this tribe of people, like river people. I don't know what it is. It's like, it's supposed to be a combat encounter, and it's almost like very awkward, and it's a product of its time in that, like, there are these what's very clearly sort of almost Native American kind of tribes people, like primitive people, if you want to call it that.
Oh, that again.
Yeah. And so they go up the river, and those people are like, this is our river, how dare you navigate this? And then they start attacking. And it just basically like stats for how many warriors are going to come out in their canoes and attack these people. It's in there. Like, I'm just telling you, it's in there, right? So that's, and then there's also potentially somewhere, once the pretender to the throne figures out that the party is out on the loose looking for this thing, he dispatches his own forces to retrieve the star, and there's an assassin who follows them around and may try and ambush them at night. But that's an optional encounter too, right? So those are the quintessential, fundamental, mandatory encounters that need to happen in order to make this adventure make sense. I don't know. It is very much set up. I'm going to take this stuff off. It is very much set up in and this is fine, A to B to C to D kind of structure, right? But I believe that apart from, I believe you could actually visit any of these places in any order and then just tell, if you show up on the Svirfneblins' doorstep, they would say, oh, well, we have these books, but we want the star. Why don't you go look in this valley and go find it? And that might send them to, the Valley of the Darrow or Thurno Pass or whatever it is. Now, obviously, I'm resetting this whole thing back around the area of Neverwinter and Oakhurst, right? So I'm not worried about the exact geographic locations. But I think, they could go to the Tower of Heavens first and try and overthrow the pretender to the throne right off the bat. And then maybe he gets kicked out or exiled, or maybe somebody in league with him goes, well, let's hire this assassin to trail these guys and take them out and get them reinstituted, or whatever. So I think if you understand how the plot pieces kind of work, dependent of each other, you could run this a little bit more like a sandbox. And in the adventure, it sort of breaks the game if they go to the tower first, or it's not an anticipated course of events. But I think if you understand the way that the pieces interlock, you can go, sure, they can go to, whatever. Yeah, Time Kaiser, I think that's a smart plan, that that a tribal level society can do stuff that advanced cultures can't. I don't think I'm gonna.
Just don't even touch it.
I don't think I'm going to incorporate that element in that particular way. Yeah. I don't think it's necessary. I think that the other thing that's going on that you're not aware of is the players know that there's a backstory element here where Neverwinter Wood is at this point in time known as the Ironwood, and it was presided over by a Grand Druid who kept everybody out. Like any human settlers, nope, the borders are patrolled, nobody gets to go, it's my domain, nobody goes. The only people who go in and out, they go up the river, they go to the Tower of the Heavens, they get their prophecy read, and then they go back down the river. Like that's it. There's traffic up and down the river, but nobody goes into the forest, nobody touches it. This is my domain, and none shall pass, right? Well, 2 or 3 years ago, this guy, thanks for the bits.
Thanks, Blind Seer.
Appreciate it. So in this timeline, about 3 years ago, the Grand Druid released his grasp on the forest, and it's not patrolled now, and people can start going in and kind of finding out what's going on. So rather than having, there's a lot more to it than that, although I haven't decided all the details about it. But that's why the two of them, why Lowstorm and Jorvin the Badger, are going into the Ironwood, is to find out what happened to this druid. Now, whatever happened to the druid probably is somehow either directly or tangentially related to this, who knows. But certainly they're going to intersect with the story just by virtue of going in there, right? But the point being is, by setting up that circumstance, that premise, I can now replace the primitive tribal society people with a group of weird fairies or intelligent badger people, or
Jorvin.
Yeah, right, exactly. Well, I mean, I have all these opportunities to have these cool role-playing encounters, or like something that really like hooks into what the characters at the table are tuned into, rather than something that's borderline offensive. BSB Care, you are right that Oakhurst started as a group of cultists, but we are way back in the prehistory. We're 1,400 years back, so Oakhurst isn't even like a twinkle in anybody's eye at this point. I think you'll see some kind of very faint foreshadowing of stuff like that, but Oakhurst, like, I wanted to deliberately go back before Oakhurst was a founded settlement, right? Like, that's probably only two. I'd have to look at what Amy wrote up, because Amy wrote up the history of Oakhurst back in the day.
Oh, really?
Yeah. But I think that was only like 200 or 300 years ago that Oakhurst was founded. So Neverwinter definitely would have been like a force to reckon with. Waterdeep was definitely a city, etc. So yes, it's all good. Now, speaking of what the characters are hooked into, there are some other events which I consider not necessarily mandatory, but major opportunities for characters to shine, for a real like moment of development, role playing, etc. So I did ask the players for goals that they had for their PC, something that they want their PC to learn or do. So we're going to take these off the table. These are our basic fundamental things. What we want to pay off, I'm going to split these just to save us some room here. So, Strum Thrum, one of Havana's goals for her character is to learn how to fly, and learn how to fly without magical aid, without any sort of enhancement. Like, she wants to be able to use her wings and her bird. You know, she's not really a full-on Kenku. I consider her a variant Kenku myself. Like, we want to dispense with the role-playing thing about her having to mimic everybody. Fine, good. Alton, it's curious that this came up earlier. Alton has heard a rumor about the world's greatest swordsman, and he wants to fight him in a duel.
What Eric doesn't know is we're actually going to bring in the world's greatest swordsman.
Yeah, and they don't have to actually like fight.
Yeah.
I mean, she's not. She wants to be more like an Aarakocra, but yeah, that's tricky, right? I'm not sure. I know this makes for riveting television, but I'm literally done. So Lowstorm, she's decided that all of the giants in her clan or tribe or whatever she's decided on nomenclature. Come on, we gotta get the product placement. Gotta get those sweet TSR dollars.
Yeah, you got here. Have the little 4th edition D&D.
We want Graham Morris to kick in to get his royalties. So Amy has decided that her tribe or clan or whatever of giants, each of them at a certain age earns a little fairy companion that is like a spirit or whatever, and I'm not sure what it is. Or what it does.
I think she's just playing too much Legend of Zelda, and she wants a Navi.
Yeah, she did. She literally said that I want a Navi.
Yeah.
And so she's decided that her character, for whatever reason, has not earned her Navi or her fairy companion, and so she's sort of on a quest, like at some point, to earn her little Navi. Okay, that's cool. And then finally, I'm not sure what Badger's goal or hook is. I'm not super concerned about it. Like, I feel like I can get that from Kyle. Mm-hmm. Excuse me, Kyle is busy furiously making all of the character art for the overlay for tomorrow night. So I don't know if there's anything that you can show them, but he's doing a fantastic job with the PC portraits.
Yeah, nothing that Kyle hasn't already posted on Twitter.
Okay,
but yeah,
very good.
Come Wednesday, we'll have
tomorrow.
At least come tomorrow. We'll have at least black and white, finished black and white portraits of everyone.
So I'm not sure what Jorvin wants. But I'm not concerned about putting that in. I mean, I've got enough stuff in the hopper right now. So between all of these things, we've got a lot to accomplish. Because essentially, like, either I've got to find a way for all of this stuff to intersect with these encounters, or they're their own encounters in and of themselves, right? So I think we're pretty well packed in terms of opportunities, and it gives us a little bit of breathing room to like have transitions and flow and things like that. But there's a lot, I think there's a lot of material here that I'm not inclined to have to, I don't feel like I have to manufacture a bunch of additional plot elements anyhow, right? I think there's a lot of fun, flavorful stuff that we can add in terms of like exploring the forest. But, you know, with Expedition of the Barrier Peaks, I really felt like I needed to graft a layer of plot on top of this dungeon crawl. And that sort of like ended up spreading its weird tendrils in a bunch of different directions that we couldn't always follow, and I couldn't always follow. The players certainly couldn't always follow, and it kind of got away from us a little bit. Whereas this feels like, all right, this is kind of the plot of what happens, and there are a few kind of things that intersect or go off in little tangent ways that are meaningful to the players, but it feels more contained, more self-contained maybe, but at least certainly it has some more boundaries around it than when I was doing Expedition to the Barrier Peaks, and it started to, I planted these great seeds, but then they started to bloom and blossom, and it became this thick jungle of plot where we started to have to fight our way through it. So that's kind of our game plan. That's what we're looking at. This still leaves plenty of room for you all to have moments of like surprise and like, oh, okay, didn't expect that. And we're looking at this stuff on a very high level, and I think there's plenty of room to color in details and add twists or call forwards that you maybe did not necessarily expect. But that's the basic framework of what we're looking for. So, or at least what we're looking at. So that's the buzz. That's where I'm looking to prep. That's kind of that's some background on where we're at with the game and session 0 and kind of like the structure of what we've put together. And now we've had a look at the structure of what's coming ahead, and we just kind of have to connect those things and kind of fight our way through it. And actually, I mean the opposite of that, because I think my main goal is to try and keep this contained to 8 sessions like we discussed, or whatever we end up scheduling it for, right? Because there are a few quirks in the schedule where like July 4th falls on a Wednesday. We're not going to play that night. Technically, like session 8 is scheduled for the Wednesday before Gen Con. Well, we're probably not going to play that night. We'll probably come back and play. In which case, you know, it depends upon where our break lines up with some of the other shows and whatnot. So maybe we will end up having an extra session so that the breaks don't so that Wildcards and Ironkeep don't both go on hiatus at the exact same time or whatever. So it's all a little bit, there's still some fuzziness in terms of TBD with the schedule that Dom and I have to work out, but I'm operating under the assumption that this is going to be 8 sessions.
Poye asks, is it a prequel to Expedition to the Barrier Peaks?
I mean, in 1,400 years in the past, yes, but not. It's not directly set up. Like, we're not going to go from this to Expedition to the Barrier Peaks. It's not set up to be.
Has the spaceship crashed at this point, though?
Oh, I think so. Yeah, right. Like, so I think, in terms of the timeline that's in my head, I think the spaceship. You know, how long have the gods been around, right? I think the Forgotten Realms gods have been around for a couple centuries for sure, right? Maybe 3 centuries. So in my mind, the ship is sort of the spark that creates divine magic on Abertoral, on the planet. And if that's the case, then they've been around for a while. But no, I don't think the star from this is the ship crashing onto the planet. No, that's not what I have in mind. So you may have you may have some surprises in store. I think that's already happened. Now, I will say that the ship occupies this weird space that's not chronologically like in sync with the planet, and I don't know that it's, you know, canonical fact that the ship doesn't go back and forth in time, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, it was clearly established that time inside the ship passes slower than time outside. So if you spend a day in the ship, it's like 7 years outside the ship. That doesn't mean that there can't be instabilities or fluxes that go back and forth. So I think there's some room to kind of play with where is the ship, and like the question, where is the ship in the chronology of the Forgotten Realms history, isn't a question that can be very neatly answered. I don't think it necessarily has to be neatly answered of it arrives on this date and then, you know, expresses influence forward. I think there could be gaps or whatever. I think it could jump back and forth, etc. So I don't know. I like to think of it in those kind of weird, super weird, science fiction-y kind of perspectives, rather than, okay, here's where it enters the timeline, and it's a thing like everything else that has a fixed place in events. Mm-hmm. All right. Timey-wimey. Yeah. I mean, you know, we could turn this into a Doctor Who game, but then we need to bring Megan back and have her run it, because I don't know enough about Doctor Who to get away with being anything other than K9. Oh no, stairs. What do we do?
Oh boy.
All right, so that's been our show for today. That's our DM prep session. I hope it was illuminating for you. I always like to talk about these high-level concepts and their practical application, and what my thought process was, where my goals with session prep are going. I hope it's valuable for you. It usually is valuable for me, and helps me make some decisions. Now I have to go home and actually make those decisions about what's going to happen tomorrow night. Tomorrow night, you can watch the Ironkeep Chronicles at 8 p.m. Pacific. Please join us. We're having a great time. It's a great crew.
Yeah.
Like, we didn't get to do a recap, or we chose not to do a recap, but I'm really happy with what everybody brought to the table. One of the big takeaways for me last week was you can prep 3 things that give the players room to play, and then just sit back and watch them play with those things.
Right. Yep.
Right. Mm-hmm. And that's the terrific thing about having a group of talented players like this. And not that, you know, and I don't think we have a lack of talented players on the channel or in the previous campaign or anything like that. But I think
Grant Morris, no.
I think it's refreshing for me to be able to sit down and kind of like spin the top and then watch the players just keep batting it around the table.
Will I keep the $700 reward tier from last session? I think that was the keeping a secret from Amy. Yeah.
It'll stay at $700.
It'll stay at $700, but yeah, we'll keep it.
I mean, we can put that stretch goal out there. I feel like that's a trick that we've played on her once before, so I don't know how deep, how readily we want to go back to that well. But, so that's the other thing that needs to come in here is they each get 4, unique or special items. Mm-hmm. That needs to come in to this session, or be negotiated with what they come into their character builds with. We need to roll hit points. And then at some point through the course of this adventure, they're going to have access to an artifact. Mm-hmm. And that's, TBD as well. So, hazard pay. Everyone else gets an insurance bump just in case it goes on a dervish tear. So, yes, you can watch our show at 8 o'clock on Wednesday night, right here on Saving Throw Show. Mm-hmm. We have a great time with chat, and I'm looking forward to seeing what happens tomorrow night. Tonight at 8 o'clock.
Right after this,
we're
going to do a replay of last night's Legacy. So tune in for that. We were talking about City of Mist and Powered by the Apocalypse system. So
Right.
if you want to see how that kind of works and functions, watch Legacy. Oh my gosh. It was the penultimate episode. There's one more episode left. Wow. There was a lot that went on last night. It was really heavy duty. So if you watch any...
Stephen Pope is aces.
Yeah, he's really cool. He's got a lot going on in that head. Definitely check it out. That's going to be replaying essentially as soon as we stop with this. We're going to start that rerun so that it ends in time for Starfinder.
Starfinder!
Which is our Starfinder game. It's Starfinder Deepwater Deep.
Deepwater Deep!
And that's our
GM Tyler Rhodes.
GM Tyler Rhodes taking on the crunchiest of systems for you. Shadowrun, Starfinder.
Can we get him to run GURPS or something?
Oh god, yeah. I mean, he'll try it. But that's a lot of fun, and everyone's back. So what in the mini series, the 3-part mini series that we did, we are now picking up where that left off. So all those players and characters are all back. So tune in. This is essentially the beginning. And then tomorrow we've got Ironkeep and also a rerun of Starfinder if you missed it. Thursday we'll do a rerun of Ironkeep. And then Friday we start our ALZ marathon at 8 p.m. on Friday. That starts with wild cards. And I really hope that you guys can tune in for that and consider saving up for it. We have some really cool prizes to give away, including this awesome Deadlands Pinnacle, the whiskey box for Deadlands, the 20th anniversary Deadlands. Inside of that is a lot of cool Deadlands stuff, and we'll be giving that away. That will be one of the prizes. So,
yeah, please tune in. Is there a command in chat that they can do to see what the calendar is for the ALZ marathon?
Well, right now, yeah, you can. They did exclamation point ALZ. That will get you started. And if you go to the Tiltify page, that has the whole schedule in there, so you can see what games we're playing and stuff like that. And yeah, 24 hours, man, it's going to be awesome. So I really hope that you guys can tune in for that. It's such a great cause, one that's near and dear to
all of our hearts. I wish that I unfortunately double booked myself for this weekend. I was planning to participate and I can't, but I can tell you that Evil Hat is kicking in $100 worth of digital prize product. So if there's something that I mentioned about Fate that catches your eye, we're giving away 4 different $25 digital gifts packs. You basically get to go to their store and pick out $25 worth of stuff, and we send you all the PDFs for it. So the Fate Horror Toolkit just came out. They have a bunch of stuff going on. So or in their lineup that would be of interest to you regardless of whether you play Fate or not.
Blades in the Dark too?
But I don't know that you might be able to get that on our store.
Yeah,
yes,
that's
a little bit of a weird product because
kind of halvesies.
we licensed it or we publish it on behalf of John Harper, and we don't have 100% of the licensing for it. I think you get the PDF if you buy the book, but I don't know that we can just sell the electronic copy. But you can get Carthoon by Brian Patterson.
Ooh, D20 Monkey. Yeah, that's awesome.
As well as a variety of other things. So there will be there's always a great set of prizes for the ALZ Marathon.
Yeah.
A lot of people come in to do a lot of work for it, and I hope you can tune in and make a contribution. I will be making a contribution monetarily since I can't make a contribution personally.
But just real quick. So no, you don't have to watch on Tiltify. You can just watch it on Twitch. But everything, the chat and the stream will be on Tiltify. So if you want to stay on there to keep abreast of the donation tiers and things like that, you can do that. Or you can just watch it on Twitch, either way. No problem. But we start with wild cards. Then we have a Shadowrun Anarchy, which is the rules light version of Shadowrun that Tyler is running. We have Omar is coming in and he's running a Dread game.
Nice.
Then let's see. I'm trying to remember these all offhand. Then Rick Budd is running Tempting Fate, a Jurassic Park skin of Lasers and Feelings, where all of the players are playing dinosaurs. So that's going to be fun.
Megan is running something, right?
Yes. yeah, so Rick is running that, and then Megan is running a Savage Harry Potter, so Savage Worlds Harry Potter game. That's going to be a lot of fun.
I really hope it's Savage Harry Potter. Like, I'll get you, Hermione.
And then we're doing Twitch GMs, which we did last time for our subathon. It was an absolute riot, but it was a lot of fun. You mean Is Always Cloudy in Barovia ever coming back?
Mm-hmm.
Well, that was a mini-series. If enough people want to watch it and have it come back and we find a place to put it, cool. We will definitely do that. But right now we've run out of time of people that can run in and do things. Looks like Blades in the Dark can only be purchased as a physical plus PDF bundle in the Evil Hat store.
Yeah. John Harper retains like the rights just strictly the PDF portion of it. You can get that at drive-thru if you want, but that wouldn't be part of the bundle. And I think these are electronic certificates. I don't think you can I don't think it's credit towards a physical product.
Sure.
It's just that's kind of the way it is.
But there's so many cool things that they have in the Evil Hat store. So
yeah, their catalog is huge.
Yeah.
So.
Anyway, but that's just one of the things. So the Deadlands thing, the Evil Hat stuff, those are just two things that we have. Pinnacle also has a ton of coupons that we're giving away, and all these awesome little things that bunches of different people have donated for that. So tune in. Donate because it's a great cause, but also you can get some nifty rewards potentially by doing so. So that's Friday. That's our Friday at 8 o'clock. So yeah, thank you guys. Thanks for tuning in. This was awesome. I'm glad to be back with DisOrganized.
Yeah, this was super fun. I know. I feel like we're making up for not having a Thursday session by just doing a double long Tuesday session.
Yeah.
We had a lot to get through today, so yeah. I'm glad we had a great talk. I really enjoyed our time together here. Yeah. So I will be back here tomorrow night. Stay tuned for the replay of Legacy from last night. Tonight coming up is Starfinder. Until then, let's dungeon!
I did it, Tom.
Is it dungeoning? Put on the dungeon thing.
I don't want to put on the dungeon thing.
Play the superhero dungeons.
No, what?
Super Dungeons and Super Dragons. I want to see Stephen Pope do that.
Okay.